Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public, either in attendance or watching at home, and welcome to this evening's Additional Democracy and Standards Committee. I will just run through some housekeeping rules. Should the fire alarm sound, please follow the lead of our officers and exit the building when instructed, and gather at the front of the building so we can make sure that everyone is accounted for. Do not use the lifts. Thank you. Please ensure that mobile phones are either set to silent or switched off for the duration of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. Please inform an officer if you do not wish to appear on camera. Evacuation of council chambers. If there is a need to evacuate the chambers, please follow the lead of our officers. We will now move on to agenda item 1. Apologies for absence.
Yes, thank you. We have Councillor Garner, Councillor Hall and Councillor Judgeridge who've sent apologies. No substitutes. Thank you, Chair.
Agenda 2. Minutes.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry, I just feel like that's the relevant time to come in. I believe previous to this meeting I did put in my apologies as well, but I just wanted to make sure that was noted that I'm here. Okay, thank you.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of August 2025. You have the minutes from 18th of August in your pack. Do I have a proposer and seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Happy to second, Chair.
Councillor Mundy.
Okay.
And then you can ask them to take the vote.
Um,
And can I have a show of hands?
can I have a show of hands, please?
Who's in favour? Yep.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, members' declaration. Does any councillors have a declaration that you wish to make, please, on the items on the agendas? No. If you could state the items, I think that. Thank you, members. We have the Constitution Updates of 2025 report in our packs, and I will hand over to Camilla Kalsun Patel to present the report to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm pleased tonight to present to you the first update to the Constitution for 2025. Members have this in their agenda pack at agenda item 4. I don't intend to run through all of the proposed changes line by line. I will be happy to take any questions that you might have or observations, but just wanting to bring out to you some of the themes that are for updating as part of this review. As members will recall, this subset of this particular committee, the Constitution Working Group, has been established, and the Constitution Working Group have met on 2 occasions to undertake the review. As the monitoring officer, I have certain powers delegated to me to make changes to the Constitution. However, there are certain changes which do require full council approval, and it is considered best practice and in accordance with our governance that would go through Constitution Working Group and then be reported back here to Democracy and Standards for any feedback, views, observations, with the hope that those recommendations would then be approved or proposed to be approved by full council. Councillors will see the general setup of the Constitution, and that as part of this review we have recognised that there are certain changes that need to be made to improve the flow of the document, remove duplication, address any typographical and grammatical errors or inconsistencies in the drafting. The Constitution itself hasn't been reproduced in full for this purpose of this committee, but the intention is that we will have that in full, taking on board any additional feedback that we may have from this meeting before we present it to full council on the 30th of October. So as I say, there's certain general changes that will be made as part of this review, and a desire to have improved cross-referencing and improved accessibility across the document. Equally, the indexing and glossary will be updated. The first change that you will see within your packs, and this is Appendix A, is around the introduction, summary, explanation and including decision making. So what this is an amalgamation of two earlier sections that appear in the existing Constitution. What we found is that there was duplication and repetition within those sections, and what we're looking to produce at the end of this and as part of our continuous reviews of the Constitution is to ensure that it is succinct and easy to follow. We've also proposed changes which are shown at Appendix B for the public participation and rights. What I'd like to specifically draw out for your attention this evening, members, is that there is a change in the deadlines being proposed that we would invite requests to speak before the meeting to be brought forward from 5 p.m. to 12 noon, 2 clear days before the meeting. Bringing forward a few hours in the working day for requests to speak, and as you'll see laterally in the document around motions, allows officers the time to engage with members of the public, those wishing to speak, as well as councillors, preparing them for those meetings and making the necessary arrangements. We have also made proposals within this document, and some additional changes hopefully will be coming forward this evening, is around the town and parish council representatives. Currently, the arrangements for planning committee is that we will only allow one town or parish council representative to speak at a meeting, and we recognise following a reflection of our planning committees that was actually inhibiting the ability to allow voices to participate in that decision making. The decision making has been consistent with our rules and our procedures, but we do recognise that that could be seen as a limitation. So within the pack, you'll see there that there's a proposal that where a site may exceed more than one town or parish council within that boundary, that there may be more than one town or parish council permitted to provide representations at planning committee. Following positive engagement with members, further proposals have been put forward, and I'd like to thank Councillor John Paul Carr for recognising that we would benefit from putting forward further clarity on that particular point to encourage those speakers to extend to consultees where they're town and parish councillors. So members, just to bear that in mind, that would be an additional change that we'd be looking to bring forward to full council as part of the recommendations, because certainly as a council we're not looking to inhibit that public participation element. Moving on, I will just clarify as well that the petition scheme has been removed from the Constitution. Within the Constitution, you would only look to produce those key documents that are relevant around decision making and authorities. It's a very helpful document, our petition scheme, but it felt unnecessary to reproduce that in full within the Constitution. So we've just again looked to highlight and cross-reference back to the key document and instead give a summary of what that petition scheme looks like, rather than detail the full arrangement line by line and certain criteria that need to be hit as part of the petition scheme. Moving on to the meeting procedure rules shown at Appendix C, we have provided some additional clarity around speaking times. So members will all be familiar with the speaking times at General Council meetings. However, at annual council meetings, we did receive feedback from group leaders around inconsistencies in practice. As a new administration following the May elections, it has caused us to look at our arrangements and reflect back on what we've been doing as custom and practice. And for us, it's really important that we document what those arrangements are so we have clarity and certainty. So we have stipulated, and it's out at paragraph 4.23, that the leader would be assigned 10 minutes and then group leaders, recognised group leaders, would be given 3 minutes to address full council at the discretion of the chair. So just to give that clarity and certainty and ensure fairness across the chamber going forward. The Constitution Working Group did consider at length and in a lot of detail around the ability to extend meeting time. So we refer to the guillotine, and some of the members have sat through meetings that have well exceeded the required 3 hours time limit. We did discuss whether we should look to put a cap on that or whether that would be 4 hours, but actually after a lot of back and forth and reflecting on practice and taking views, members felt that actually that discretion sits with the chair, it sits with the committees, and really that should be a decision that should be reflected locally for the business that's being conducted in that meeting. We have had limited instances where a meeting has exceeded 4.5 hours in any event. But a very valid point that came out of those discussions is recognising the welfare of councillors and officers in the room. So to recognise that there should be, where possible, a break at around the sort of 2 hour mark to allow members to take that comfort break. So we have incorporated that into the changes. It was spoken to elsewhere in the Constitution, but we, members of the Constitution Working Group, felt that it would be helpful to really have that nice and clear to manage the welfare of our councillors. Looking ahead, we've also, as the Constitution Working Group, did consider the ability to limit the number of motions coming forward. We did consider, as a collective, the various options that could be adopted. So limiting the number of motions per meeting on a first come first served basis, political balance, capping it where there will be excess. Generally, it was felt that actually there should be work done within each group to make sure that motions are being used effectively and they should be succinct. Where there are other tools available, using council as an example, councillors may wish to make use of questions rather than addressing through motions. So following a lot of debate and discussion, generally the feeling was that we would leave that as is, but certainly something to keep under review. Members will be aware that at our last council meeting we had 7 motions come forward, which was a very high level for this council to see come forward, but that was actually manageable from an officer point of view because of the good work and engagement by group leaders and their members to engage with officers to make sure that those motions were properly drafted and acceptable. So we felt that actually maybe now isn't the time to be making those changes to motions and looking to cap that. We have also changed the arrangements that the monitoring officer can reject the motions in consultation with the chair. And again, that's just a logistics view. I would provide that advice to the chair and say these are all the reasons why this may or may not be acceptable. Where it's acceptable, I would allow that motion and it would appear in the agenda pack. Where it was considered outside of those rules, the practice as it currently is, I would reach out to the chair and seek her approval as to whether that should be included. But the chair would very much be guided by those sort of operational and legal parameters as to why that should or shouldn't be allowed. So the Constitution Working Group recognised that would be something where we might want to flip that delegation around. Committees were looked at as part of this group, and also by myself as the monitoring officer, and what we recognised is that there is some inconsistencies in the presentation of how we set out terms of reference, quoracy, substitutes and training. So it hasn't been reproduced for the purpose of this document, but just to alert members to the proposed changes that we aim to have a more consistent view, so that when you're looking at, for example, employment committee, it looks and feels the same in its presentation as you would find with audit and governance. So it's just feeding into that accessibility and ease of reference. There are some minor formatting changes and presentation changes to be made as well. Planning committee, we haven't made any proposed changes to that, as we know that there was a motion brought to full council at the last meeting to revisit the planning committees and the decision to have a single planning committee. This is actually going to be a piece of work that this committee, Democracy and Standards, will be looking at in November, and the Constitution Working Group before that, before a report is taken to full council. So we've deliberately parked that as part of a phased piece of work that will be coming in. The scheme of allowances, that's also something that we'll be looking at later on in the year. And the contract procedurals, just to highlight to members that that did already undergo a significant number of changes. Whilst it was under my delegations as the monitoring officer, those changes reflected the change in legislation, but were significant in terms of the size of changes that needed to be made. So it looked like a very different document, but actually it was just ensuring that it remained legally compliant. We have identified a few typographical errors or formatting changes that need to be picked up, but we haven't reproduced that for this purpose. And then just leading on to the last sort of two sections is around the member officer protocol. The member officer protocol, as we currently have it, is fit for purpose, but we want to make sure it reflects the standards and behaviours that we hold each other to account. And whilst we have the member code of conduct, and we as officers follow a code of conduct also, we need to recognise that relationship and that dynamic, how that works in operation. So we've tightened that up a little bit. We've addressed some of the issues that other councils have experienced around social media, councillors taking to social media to maybe name and shame individual officers, and I'm really pleased to say that that hasn't happened at Northamptonshire, but learning from other authorities and just making sure that our constitution protects us from that, and we've got really clear boundaries of what officers can expect from members, and likewise what members can expect from officers. Following on from the Constitution Working Group, we did identify that this document doesn't fully yet speak to our values, our One Council values, that we as officers have embedded within us, and we live and breathe them, and members also do. So as part of the future work, we'd like to explore, that was one of the recommendations coming out of Constitution Working Group, maybe how we can knit that in a little bit more closely with our values. The document that's been presented to you, I would still recommend it for approval, but noting that we might want to do some further intensive work to reflect in our values, which we may link in with when we've set our corporate priorities. The joint arrangements, administrative changes will be made under my delegation, and they'll just be picked up. But just to alert this particular committee to a wider piece of work that's been undertaken by myself and my counterpart at West Northamptonshire is a review of the joint arrangements for our Shared Services Committee and the Children's Trust. That will be reported back to those bodies in November, I believe, of this year. I think it's just to reflect, well, I know it is, as the author of the report, the changes that we're looking to make around the joint committees is to reflect that we're now 4 years in maturity, and making sure that the arrangements of those joint committees and the shared services committees reflects what we're doing on the ground, and it remains fit for purpose, because I think it's widely recognised that we have all grown and developed in those last 4 years. There is a nod to some changes that are anticipated to be made to the officer scheme of delegations. Now, those officer scheme of delegation changes will arise from the functions that are primarily the executive functions, which is why we haven't reproduced them here. But what I would want to say is, since producing this report, further changes have been presented that we've looked at as a corporate leadership team, primarily coming out of the financial procedure rules, and also recognising that we're currently going through the recruitment for our Director of Change. We've actually paused that piece of work that's bringing forward. So that timeline that we've indicated, that there'll be a report brought to the Executive on the 14th of October, we're actually looking at the following month for the lead-in on that, because that will allow us to make any additional changes arising from hopefully the successful recruitment exercise for the Director of Change, but also to have a little bit of a deeper look around the financial procedure rules too. The next steps are set out within the report. We've reproduced certain elements of the Constitution for your consideration and thoughts today, but we do anticipate that there's further work for this committee and our Constitution working group to undertake in the coming months and years. Some of the anticipated changes being remote meetings, proxy voting. We already know we're undertaking the review of planning committee, and we want to look at how we engage the public and residents in democracy and decision making. The recommendations are set out within paragraphs 3.1 of the report, and I will be happy to take any questions or observations that councillors may have, Chair.
Members, if you would now like to debate the report before you. Fairhall.
A couple of minor points and then a slightly larger one. So you mentioned about the petition scheme coming out of the Constitution because it's already included elsewhere. Just wonder where this would then sit in terms of, so it isn't lost from the processes, and would it be picked up by this committee or by another committee at some point in terms of reviewing, refreshing?
Yep, so the petition scheme sits within my delegations, and sort of that's part of one of the documents that I would own and continue to review in the way that we, as certain officers within the council, we have policies aligned to us. So that's one that fits within my brief. It's available in full on our website. Of course, we can make a paper copy available for anybody who requests it also, but that would be part of that continuous review. As part of the cross-referencing within the document, we wouldn't just say, it says that, and we don't need to look. We'll say, it says that, let's just go and check and see if that's still fit for purpose, and reflects what it needs to reflect.
Okay. And my second smaller one was under part 3.2 meeting procedure rules, 2.1.2 on page 2, it uses the phrase, and this is in terms of setting the annual general meeting, the annual council meeting. In a year when there are ordinary elections for councillors, the annual meeting shall take place within 21 calendar days from the retirement of the outgoing councillors. I just thought that was just a funny way of talking about it on the basis that it's talking about the new municipal year, it's talking about the new council. I just wondered whether or not within 21 days of the election of new councillors might be a more appropriate phraseology than talking about these ones who had retired and were no longer with it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fairhall, and that's why I enjoy bringing these reports, because it brings a different insight and dynamic of how we can all read it. And thinking back to some of the work that we did in Constitution Working Group, there was something that seemed quite innocuous from an officer point of view, but from a councillor point of view could seem quite exclusionary, which we absolutely hadn't intended. So that would be something we could pick up as part of the drafting to make sure that that reads in that particular way, if members are happy for that.
Just then the final one, which I think is a slightly larger one. So in terms of under the public participation and rights section, part 2, 13.1, page 7, it refers to the council's whistleblowing policy. If someone has a concern about any matter relating to perceived unlawful activities in the council, then you can whistleblow by using the council whistleblowing policy. Having looked at the council whistleblowing policy, it's written primarily for members of staff whistleblowing, rather than written on the basis of a member of the public. And in a sense, I sort of thought, my initial thought was, wouldn't you make a complaint to the council about that? So whether or not it's a case of it is the right policy to use, but the policy probably needs to be written in a more broader fashion, so we've created work for ourselves, or rather you've probably created work for yourself, or whether or not there should be a different process whereby someone absolutely get the right of, if someone's got a concern, absolutely they must raise it, but I'm not quite sure the whistleblowing policy as it currently is the right place.
Councillor Fairhall, I think you've already identified a piece of work that we've got in train, and I'm really pleased that you've recognised that. So prior to the elections, a report was taken to Audit and Governance on the effectiveness of our whistleblowing policy, and did it speak to all of the sort of work of the council? Did it speak to how you can raise a complaint if it relates to a contractor or somebody delivering services on behalf of the council? The Audit and Governance Committee earlier in the year recognised that there were certain limitations, and it was a report that I'd brought. It is actually on the forward plan for Audit and Governance, and I believe their meeting is in November, and that's when hopefully we will get that sign off. But we have already recognised that that document needs to be refreshed. I think the reference to it within this particular document still remains fit for purpose. Does the whistleblowing policy itself or the protected disclosures need to be strengthened? Yes, and that's a piece of work we've already got ongoing.
Councillor Fedorowicz?
Fedorovich, thank you.
Yeah,
Actually,
sorry.
I've started saying it. My actual name is pronounced Fedorovich. I haven't corrected anyone for a long time, but I feel as a new council probably I should start. I've started pronouncing it differently myself. But yes, okay, so just a couple of sort of big ones. Petitions did come up for me, actually, and I know that that was obviously coming off this document, but I thought it'd be worthwhile now mention it as it's sort of here still. That generally I've had quite a lot of negative feedback about our online petition. I know previously we used to just allow any petition to be made that is relevant to the council on any platform, and I know certain members of the public will have certain platforms that they prefer to use. Personally, I've also had quite a lot of issues using it, where you have to register an account and then you have to go through, and there's quite a lot of verification issues, and some people who I've asked to sign various different petitions have literally been unable to do so, and I think that kind of hampers the democratic process, obviously, because we're not able to talk about an issue or something like that. So that was probably one thing I wanted to raise. And yes, with regards to the public participation deadline, this is a tricky one, because I do appreciate, especially with other deadlines that we've pushed back, such as motions and questions, those make more sense to have more time, because officers and councillors need to have the time to review them and to often create a response. For public participation, though, there isn't as much preparation, or as I understand it, I think that's really a question, is how much preparation is there. But if it's just that they're coming along to speak and they've got a prepared statement, I don't see why we'd need to move that back necessarily, because, well, just to give you a frank timeline on council like prior meetings, like we meet obviously before council, we only get a week before the topics come out. If some other motion is raised where we think, oh, actually we want to make sure that speakers can come and speak on that, it's a tight deadline to turn around sometimes, and also some people are working, it's sometimes hard to get hold of people, so to have the whole of, if our meetings are normally on Thursday, that we're talking about the deadline being noon on Monday, I believe. So I think that can be quite tight, basically, especially if quite a lot of members will have their group meetings maybe on Thursday or Friday or at the weekend. So that gives you half a day, sometimes, if you can't get hold of people at the weekend. So that's just something to bear in mind. I personally would be prefer to keep it as it is, just to make sure. For me, it's always about including people, and then we get a really good hopefully engagement as well. We're talking about like engaging the public. I think everything else I was really quite happy with, and obviously I'm on the group, so I've been feeding into all of that. I did note as well the extending business times. I know we've generally said about 2 hours to manage welfare, but if we're usually about a 3-hour meeting, I don't know if it's worthwhile actually putting it like halfway between that. So I know it's obviously discretion, but yes, otherwise that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, if I may, just to get a little bit more clarification on that questions point, because I absolutely understand that for the motions, for the council questions, the work that goes on to prepare that. Are you thinking about the public questions? And then could I just ask for sort of a general view across the room as to whether the view would be to just leave it as is for now in relation to the public engagement element and to not look to bring that forward, because it is correct that the public element, certainly for statements or questions, they're not published in any of the agenda packs, so it wouldn't hamper that. It would simply be the officer time behind the scenes to pull the responses together if we were supporting members in that, if it could be answered in a different way. But I'd be comfortable parking that for this particular review and then maybe taking a bit more of a look at it and see how we operate between now and May. I'd just put that out for members to offer any insights or any observations, whether you broadly support that.
I know I'm going back to the points made in the previous meeting, I appreciate your response about the reasons for the deadlines. I think my concern would be if you end up having different deadlines for motions, questions to the executive, and then public participation. I think it could get quite confusing.
It's different anyway, though.
No, but they're talking about moving them even further so that the deadlines will change for each. I think if there's a decent bit of space between them, I think there just needs to be some thought into the balance between obviously officers being able to get back and being able to streamline everything, but also having consistency about where people know when to get the responses in, etc.
Thank you. And that is really, really helpful to have that insight, because I've read a lot of constitutions, so as well as reading ours, I read it. A lot of others, and different councils have different practices, and I'm just thinking out loud. A way to improve that engagement ability is maybe we just need a simple table within our constitution to say, if it's a motion, it's this much. If it's a question, it's this much. If it's a public question, it's this much. And it's just there on a page, and it's really clear. We're trying to do more work with our members to bring it to your attention. We produce certain documentation, but that might get lost over the passage of time. So we'll put news articles out on our members' intranet and say, alert, alert, it's coming up. We'll send a message to group leaders, but we can't do that for every meeting. But I'm just wondering, a way to combat that sort of confusion that might arise. Do we just produce it almost a plan on a page, but it's a deadlines on a page, as a way forward?
I think that would be a good thing. I also think that actually probably the further review of the Constitution proposed in May might be a good time to take a more detailed look at the whole question about public participation. I think there's a lot of sense to where there's a process that requires there's a formal process or a formal response required. I think I understand that's the basis upon which these proposed changes are being made, and I get that and I support that. I think where a member of the public wants to come and speak, make a statement, I personally think the deadline is unnecessary. But again, I'm starting to have the debate now. I think it's one that we should look at in more detail, and say just make the process as clear with a grid. I think absolutely.
Councillor Bone?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with my colleagues across the way, especially with public participation. We're meant to be encouraging them, and I think to be prescriptive against the public is a no-no for me anyway.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on that very quickly because I think I actually think there's some really good opportunities here for us to do things better. Because I think with you saying that one of the big challenges is collating public statements, I think that's actually a really potentially good opportunity to get people to potentially fill out a form or something like that, so it automatically collates it. There's a really good opportunity, I think, for technology to help us out here and to save officers time. So, and then that might mean we can reduce that deadline even more, so that people have even more opportunity. So, yeah, I think I support us re-looking at this. Thank you.
And thank you. Just for absolute clarity, I think what we've sort of already put a nod to is at 6.3.3 around the public engagement and consultation with the local democracy, because this was something that was discussed at length at the Constitution Working Group and lots of good ideas coming out. But what we recognised is probably too much to just take in that short period that we had. So what we'd propose to do is maybe make those changes now that need to ensure that we can work in a swift way and encourage and support members for meeting deadlines and promoting accuracy in how we produce our reports back, but to have another conversation and a more detailed look at that wider public engagement. And certainly I don't think anybody in this room would look to inhibit public participation, and if we could bring that even further forward, that it's on the evening of a meeting and this is how it can work, or different ways, and maybe looking at technology. And I'm sure, did we even talk about robots and AI and all sorts? There's a lot that can be done, but we think that that's probably something that warrants a more deeper conversation and engagement with members.
As debate has concluded and there are no proposed amendments, we will go to the vote. Please use the voting cards in front of you. Unanimous.
Chair, just for the benefit of making sure that we fully document everything, after all, we are democracy and standards. We want to make sure that we follow our own internal governance. Could I just ask for a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Carr, and then seconded Councillor Carr-Vedder. Thank you.
Agenda item 5. There being no further business, I will close the meeting at 7:38 and wish you all a safe journey home.